At exactly 2:13 a.m., someone knocked on my front door. 3 slow knocks. Not loud, not soft either. Just enough to pull me out of sleep and leave my heart beating hard before I even opened my eyes. I lay still in the dark, staring at the ceiling, waiting for the sound to come again. My room was cold. The fan turned above me with a weak clicking noise. For a second I told myself I had dreamed it. Then it came again. Knock, knock, knock. Same rhythm, same strange patience. I grabbed my phone from the nightstand. 2:13 a.m. The screen lit up my room in pale blue. No missed calls. No messages. Nobody came to my house that late. Nobody ever had a reason to. I live alone at the edge of town, in a narrow old house my uncle left me after he died. The road out front is empty even in the daytime. At night it feels cut off from everything else, like the whole street ends at my gate and the dark just swallows the rest. Another set of knocks echoed through the house. I sat up. My mouth felt dry. Every story I had ever heard about strangers at the door came back to me at once. Drunk people, thieves, someone hurt, someone pretending to be hurt. I slipped out of bed and stepped into the hallway. The floorboards gave a low creak under my weight. The house was silent except for the fan behind me and the old clock downstairs ticking in the living room. When I reached the top of the stairs, I stopped. There was a shadow moving under the front door. Not pacing, not shifting, just standing there, waiting. I don't know what made me do it, but I called out, "Who is it?" For a few seconds there was nothing. Then a man's voice, low and calm, came through the wood. "Let me in," he said. "You already know me." And somewhere deep in my chest, something cold seemed to recognize him. I wish I could say the voice sounded wrong, but the truth is worse. It sounded familiar, like a memory I had buried badly and one that had finally found its way back here. I didn't answer him again. I stood at the top of the stairs, holding the banister until my fingers hurt, listening for any sound from the other side of the door. The man didn't knock again. That was the part that made it worse. He just stayed there, quiet, like he knew I was still listening. The living room below was barely visible in the dark. Moonlight slipped through the thin curtains and laid pale lines across the floor. My uncle used to say this house held sound strangely. He said old places remembered things. Back then I laughed every time he said it. Standing there that night, I wasn't laughing. The house smelled like dust and rain-soaked wood. A storm. I backed away from the door and went straight to the kitchen for the largest knife I owned. I know how stupid that sounds now. A kitchen knife against whoever was outside. But holding it gave my hands something to do besides shake. I stood there in the dark with the blade angled toward the floor, listening, waiting for another knock. Instead, I heard footsteps, not on the porch, inside the house. A slow step came from the hallway behind me. Then another. I spun around so fast I nearly slipped. The kitchen doorway opened into a narrow hall that led to the dining room and the small bathroom under the stairs. It was almost completely black, but I knew the shape of that hallway better than my own face. I had walked it half asleep 1,000 times. Something had moved there. I switched on the kitchen light. The bulb flickered twice before holding. The hallway was empty. I checked the bathroom. Empty. I checked the dining room. Empty. By then my breathing sounded ragged and ugly. I kept hearing tiny noises in the house that had never bothered me before. The hum of the refrigerator. A drip from the sink. Wood settling in the walls. Then my phone vibrated in my pocket. I nearly dropped the knife. Unknown number. For 1 second I considered ignoring it. Then I answered. I didn't say hello. The line was full of static. Beneath it I heard breathing. Slow, steady, close enough to feel personal. Then the same man's voice whispered, "Don't look out the back window." I turned before I could stop myself. The back window sat over the sink, black as a mirror. For half a second I only saw my own reflection. Pale face, wild eyes, knife in hand. Then lightning flashed somewhere far away, just enough to whiten the yard. A man was standing beside the old water pump. He was facing the house, watching me. When the yard went dark again, the phone line clicked dead. A second later, 3 knocks came from my bedroom upstairs. Above my head, I should have run out the back door. That is the thought I still wake up with. Instead, I ran upstairs. Every instinct I had was broken by panic. I took the steps 2 at a time, gripping the knife so tightly my wrist hurt, while those 3 patient knocks sounded again from the other end of the hall. My bedroom door was open. I know I had closed it before sleeping. I always did. The latch stuck unless I pulled it firmly, and I remembered doing exactly that. But now the door stood half open, swaying slightly as if someone had brushed past it. The hall felt colder than the rest of the house. I moved toward the room and pushed the door wider with the tip of the knife. My window was open. The curtains were breathing inward with the night air. Mud covered the floor beneath the sill. Not footprints, not shoe prints, just wet marks, long and uneven, as if something had been dragged across the boards and into the center of the room. That was where I saw him. At first I thought it was a trick of the dark. A shape crouched beside my bed, too still to be human. Then lightning flashed again, and the whole room lit up in white. It was a man, tall, thin, wearing dark clothes soaked with rain and mud. His head was bent at an angle that looked wrong, like his neck had been broken and left that way. His face was hidden, but I could see one hand resting on my pillow. He was not looking at me. He was looking at the place where my head had been. The light vanished. For one terrible second, neither of us moved. Then he spoke in the same calm voice from the door and the phone. "You changed rooms." I ran. I don't remember turning or screaming or dropping the knife. I only remember the sound that came behind me as I reached the stairs. Not footsteps, laughter, soft at first, then right in my ear, though no one was touching me at all. I looked back once. The room was empty again, but my pillow still showed where his hand had rested. I made it outside barefoot, half falling down the porch steps, and ran into the road without knowing where I meant to go. The night was freezing. Gravel cut into my feet. Behind me, the front door of the house stood wide open, moving gently on its hinges. No one came out. No one called after me. The whole yard was silent, as if the house had swallowed every sound. I ended up at my neighbor's place nearly half a mile away. Mr. Salazar was 70 and deaf in one ear, but he opened the door the second he saw my face. I must have looked insane. Mud on my legs, no shoes, no knife, crying so hard I could barely speak. He called police. They searched my house before sunrise. They found the open bedroom window, mud on the floor, and my knife at the top of the stairs. They did not find a man. One of the officers asked if I had been drinking. Another asked if I was under stress. I kept telling them about the voice, the phone call, the figure beside my bed. They listened like people who already had an answer they preferred. Then the older officer asked me a question that made my stomach drop. "Why didn't you mention your father?" I told him my father had died when I was 10. Car accident. That was the story my mother gave me, and kept giving until the day she was buried. The officer looked at me for a long time before saying, "No, your father vanished." Later that morning, while they took notes in my kitchen, Mr. Salazar pulled me aside and asked me if the knocking had come in threes. When I said yes, his face changed. He told me the man who used to live in my house before my uncle moved in had the same habit. He would come home drunk after midnight and knock 3 times so his wife would know it was him. One night she did not open the door. He was found in the road at 2:13 a.m. I asked Mr. Salazar his name. He said it without hesitation. It was my father's. My phone rang that night at 2:13 again. The screen only said, "Home."